Welcome to Oklahoma Shine on Music. We are excited to have Becky Hobbs with us, an Oklahoma Music Hall of Famer and a songwriter and a singer and a piano player and also a screenwriter. You have done so much with your career, and thank you for being a part of this episode with us.
Oh, I'm just tickled to death to be here.
Well, so you grew up in Bartlesville.
Yes.
Born there?
Born there. Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about starting out in Oklahoma.
Oh, wow. Well, I was born in Memorial Hospital, and it's not a hospital anymore. Everything's changed in Bartlesville. But I started playing the piano when I was 9 years old, and my sister was 3.5 years older than me, and she'd sit down at the piano and play all these beautiful pieces, and she was taking piano lessons, and I would sit down at the piano and make up my own songs. And we would fight after school, like who would get to practice. And we'd hover over the piano bench and hit each other with our butts. And then we'd try to knock the other one off, and then we'd start fighting with the Baptist hymnal. So I usually won because I was meaner than her, and I got to practice more. So I was making up my own songs because I felt that it was a lot easier than reading those notes on the pieces of paper. My dad was a big music lover, and he turned me on to Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan and Duke Ellington and Western Swing, Bob Wills. And my mom was a big country music fan, and she turned me on to Patsy Cline, George Jones, Jim Reeves. So I was raised with a lot of different kinds of music, and my sister was into rock and roll. So I loved Elvis Presley and Ricky Nelson, Buddy Holly. Mm-hmm. So when I was 15, actually when I was 14, I begged my parents to buy me a folk guitar. And they spent $25 and bought me a guitar. And I formed a little duo folk group with Nancy Sloan and then later with Beth Ann Morrison. And we went and played at all kinds of parties. Anybody who would have us, we were there. And then I wanted an electric guitar. And with the folk guitar, I started writing protest songs. I was into Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. And I really, songs about peace, which I'm still writing songs about peace. It's the most important thing on our planet. But at age 15, I started what has now been documented as the first all-female rock band in the state of Oklahoma. We were called the Four Faces of Eve. We did a lot of practicing in living rooms. We thought we would get a lot of boys' attention, but instead they ran from us. Yeah. They were pretty scared of us, and if we played a gig, we had very few gigs, but if somebody, actually wanted to hire us for something, after the show they'd come up and sort of their heads would be hanging, and they'd say, "Well, you're pretty good for girls." I know. For girls, yeah.
Now, you were in Oklahoma the first, but you really had to have been among the very, very first in the United States also, right?
Probably so. I had heard about an all-girl band in Chicago and one in Detroit, and very few that I knew about.
Did you ever record with the all-female rock band?
We did. We actually got some work on Dance Party on Channel 6 in Tulsa, hosted by Lee Bailey, and we got to be fairly popular there. Also go to a guy's house named Gil something, and we recorded some things, and he would actually make an acetate recording, like a big thick record. And I was playing electric guitar by then. Once again, I begged my parents for an electric guitar. My dad knew a guy named Ed Moss that he worked with that built guitars, and they were patterned after the German Frommes guitars. And my parents bought me a $7 microphone. Oh, and an airline amplifier, a $50 airline amplifier. And I plugged in and cranked up the volume. We had 2 volumes in the all-girl band, loud and louder.
So when you were doing all that and you were influenced by George Jones, what was it like when you eventually got to work with George Jones?
It was great. When I eventually got to work with George Jones, I had opened a few shows for him, and I was sort of shy around him, but he was just always so friendly, and Nancy was always so friendly. And then when after I wrote Jones on the Jukebox, I wrote it with the late great wild man Mac Vickery and Don Goodman, and I wanted to release it as a single, but I wanted to have George's blessing. So I played it for him, and he loved it. He just loved it. So and Jones on the Jukebox did very well for me. And the funny thing is, backstage, George and Nancy would always come up to me and say, "We just love the way you sing the word quarter. Say quarter for us." And I'd say quarter, and they would bust out laughing. And I would say, "What's so funny? It's quarter, ain't it?"
Yeah.
So we had a good time.
Dave Ennis, he's a big fan of yours. He appreciates
nice.
as a songwriter. He's written for Peter Cetera and lots of big stars, and he was marveling at your songwriting. So how did you get into that?
How sweet is that? Well, how I got into the songwriting?
Yeah.
Well, it started in Bartlesville, and it's just something, I was born to do it. And all the years that I've been an artist and a singer and going out there on stage, I really feel like I sort of have to do that to be a vehicle to get the songs out. Mm-hmm. Nothing would make me happier than to sit at home at my keyboard. I got a grand piano at home too, but I got to get hubby out of the studio downstairs because my grand piano shakes the house when I play it. But I've got like six
I bet it really
7.
does the way you play it.
Yeah.
You've been kind of referred to as the Jerry Lee Lewis type performer. So to give the audience a perspective, you've got a lot of energy in your performances. I've been lucky to see you perform, and so I really marvel at that. But back to the songwriting. So you got, when would you say, what age were you when you wrote the first song?
I was 9 probably. The first songs were just instrumentals, just me at the piano.
So 9 years old, an instrumentalist.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. And then when I started writing the protest songs, I'd play the piano and also I played acoustic guitar. But I think the first song I can remember that I wrote lyrics to was "You was a dog when I first met you, but I can't unleash you now." I'm so sorry.
Well, did that one make it to a record?
Oh, heck no.
Oh, okay.
No, it made it to the garbage can. Yeah.
Well, so I know we'll get into some of your big hits here a little bit, but which song of your repertoire, not necessarily a hit, are you the most proud of that you actually wrote?
Oh, well, the one I'm most proud of writing is the biggest one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Angels Among Us, I'm guessing it. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Creator, for that song. It was inspired by my guardian angel, and I've told the story on TV shows before, but, well, shortly before Christmas of 1985, right before I go to sleep, I feel like I was in some kind of an impact. And I'd wake up, sit up in bed thinking, but what? What do you want me to know? Anyway, this feeling continued through Christmas. My boyfriend and I drove from Nashville to Tulsa, back and forth, and a couple of times we even pulled over because I felt like something was going to happen. Got back home, then January, the wee hours of the morning, January 24th, I was in my kitchen making a birthday cake because I was going to have people over later that day to celebrate my birthday. And a force took hold of my arm and pulled me out into the front yard. And I stood under a tree and I looked up at the sky and I said, "But what?" And a loud masculine voice said, "Be careful, this may be your last birthday." And I asked for more information, didn't get it. I got that same shaky feeling. I went back in the house, finished the cake, had people over later that day. The next morning, my band and I got up and loaded up our Dodge Maxi van, pulling a trailer. We had a gig in Albertville, Alabama, for a policeman's benefit. Played the show. We were on our way back home to Nashville. We were at a 4-way, a stoplight outside of town, 2 highway intersections. I'm sitting in the second row. I looked out the left window. I saw an 18-wheeler coming. Our light was red, and then our light turned green, and I felt the guy driving our van started going, and I just in a split second I yelled, "Stop." He never even saw it. The 18-wheeler crashed into us. The left front of the Dodge Maxi van trailer broke off. We spun around, dead silence, and I thought, my God, I thought we were all dead because it was just dead silence. And I thought, my God, this is what they were telling me. And lo and behold, we were okay. You know, we all had cuts, bruises. I had a sprained ankle, and we went to the hospital, were released. And that's when I wrote down the title, I Believe There Are Angels Among Us.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
so anyway, I savored this. I had the chorus, and I savored it, and I savored it, and I worked on it. It didn't feel right to say I was in a van with my band. It just, you know,
Right.
I wanted something that would reach out to everyone, especially children, because children see and hear their angels more than we do, because we've gotten so, you know, used to the physical world.
Is that part of how come Alabama has that children's choir kind of come in? Is that a reasoning for that?
Well, yes, I think so. Plus, Teddy Gentry's, I think it was her Sunday school, his daughter. I think it was her Sunday school department that they brought them in. Yeah.
It helps make the record extra special.
It does, doesn't it? And the wild thing is, my version, which is on Best of the Beckaroo, Part 1, I don't know if there'll ever be a Part 2, Randy Owen spoke the first part of the first verse, and I always wondered, but here's the deal. I'll go back to tell you how I finished the song. For years, I was savoring this chorus, and then a little bit of it came, but it didn't. So I called Don Goodman, who who co-wrote Jones of the Jukebox. He is a word wizard. When he plugs in, it's just, he'll go, I got it, Beck. And then he'll just spout out something unbelievable. So he came over, I played him the chorus. I said, do you want to help me finish this? And he had tears running down his face. He said, Beck, I'd be honored. So we finished it. I took a little cassette over to Music Mill Studio, put Randy Owen's name on it. Goodman said, you got to get this to Randy Owen. And Alabama had already recorded 2 of my songs. And I thought, it doesn't really sound like an Alabama song. That's what I thought. But I did it. And Randy Owen, within 2 weeks he called me. And he was asking, how did you write this? And he said that he had been reciting the words to his daughter Randa, who was 5 years old at the time. And she loved it. And that's why he decided to recite the first part of it.
Wow.
Because his 5-year-old daughter wanted that. And it was like a bedtime story.
So how did you get the first 2 songs to Alabama?
Wow. I Want to Know You Before We Make Love. Oh, I took a little cassette over to Music Mill. I had met Alabama briefly a couple of times, and I always had a very spiritual connection with Randy Owen. I felt like we were kindred spirits. Mm-hmm. So I just dropped that cassette off, and they called me the following Monday, and they had recorded it. Now that was, it was meant to be. So
now, of
grateful.
course, Conway Twitty
had
the hit with it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So what happened was it was on Alabama's 40-Hour Week album, and when I found out it was not going to be a single, my then manager said, Beckaroo, take it to Conway Twitty. And I said, really? But it's on a multi-million selling album. But Conway Twitty was the kind of guy who, he didn't care. He would cut a pop cut and bring it to the country market. Conway Twitty told me that he never wanted to look at a lyric sheet to see who wrote the song when he was getting the song pitched to him, because he didn't want that to influence his choice. He cut the best songs he could find.
It worked out well for him.
Yes, I loved him so much. But so that's how I got I Want to Know You Before We Make Love, cut by Alabama in the first place. And then Christmas Memories, once again, I took my little cassette over there and left it for Randy Owen. And he called me and he said that they had tried to cut it in the studio, but he couldn't get through it without crying because he had lost his dad. and I had written this song with John Greenbaum and Randy Albright. But I had the verse and the chorus actually when I brought it into the session, and I had written it about going back home and thinking about my dad. So I thought, oh my God, they tried to cut it, but it's not going to be on the album. What can I do, you know? And I just kept praying about it, and lo and behold, he went back in the studio and tried it again, and he nailed it. And he told me that it was his mother's favorite song on their Christmas album.
Oh, how nice.
Isn't that sweet?
Well, you mentioned Conway Twitty, so he has Oklahoma roots, haven't been here for several years. So tell us a little bit about Conway.
Oh my gosh! Well, as I mentioned, he would just record the best songs he could find, no matter who wrote them. And the week that I Want to Know You Before We Make Love was climbing up the charts, it was in the top 10, climbing up. I opened for him in Branson, and Candy Parton, who co-wrote I Want to Know You Before We Make Love with me, she flew in from L.A., and Conway invited us to come to his bus after the show. And he told me something real sweet. Because, you know, I knew no fear. I was sending little cassettes to him, too. And he said, you know, I know that sweet little voice of yours, he said. And he said that a song that I had pitched to him, he said that he actually took it to Tammy Wynette. But then she hadn't had a chance to cut it yet, or she didn't cut it. And then, of course, she died way too young. So, but isn't that the sweetest thing?
Yeah.
How many people do that, you know?
Really nice. So who else from Oklahoma? You're here in town. We're getting this opportunity because you came to celebrate Wanda Jackson.
Yeah.
She's recorded one of your songs.
Yes. Oh, my God, to have Wanda Jackson record a song I wrote. When I heard about it, I was so excited. It's a song called She Broke Her Promise. And I wrote that song about my mom and dad. My dad always told my mom, if anything ever happens to me, promise me that you'll remarry. And it always bothered my mom. She said, well, Bill, okay, because he never wanted her to be alone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And, when that song came to me, I wrote that song by myself. It came in a whoosh and a bunch of goosebumps, and it was so meant to be. But to have Wanda Jackson, and when you talk about looking up to other artists, oh my God, I've looked up to her because she was just rocking it, man. You know, when other females weren't. Yeah. It's such an honor to be here to honor her.
Well, and there's so many of you female pioneers that I think it's particularly interesting that they all hailed from Oklahoma, or so many of them did.
Yeah.
And you were a part of an exhibit here a few years ago that celebrated several of you, and you did a wonderful job by helping get us connected with a lot of them that came here, and so thank you for doing that.
Oh, God, you're welcome. Thank you for all you have done, especially for us female artists.
Well, you deserve a lot of it. I think, you mentioned Wanda was a pioneer in rock and roll, and you with an all-female rock band, and but I think you knew Lori Collins, didn't you, from the Collins Kids?
Well, I had very briefly met her, but when I moved to L.A., goodness gracious, well, before I moved to L.A., I went to Tulsa University one year, and I was playing in an all-girl band from Tulsa at that time called the Surprise Package, SIRPRIZE package, and then later we went psychedelic and became the Wax Madonna. But that's a long story. Yeah, and I had a great Les Paul electric guitar, and I'm so sorry, I decoupaged it with people like Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix. I ruined the finish, but maybe somebody's redone it, by now.
Yeah.
But so let's see, I went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana for a couple of years after the all-girl band era, and played with a southern rock band named Swamp Fox. And then Louis Anderson, who was the guitar player, is always a guitar player in the band, and I went to L.A. and drove our jalopies out there and started pitching our songs. And I have another story about that, which I'll get back to. Well, when I was living out in L.A., I met Larry Collins, and
who was her brother.
and Sandy Pinkard. I mean, you know, a lot of us songwriters from this particular area found each other out in LA. And Larry was very flirtatious and very wanting to take me out, and we started dating. And he and Sandy Pinkard wrote "You're the Reason God Made Oklahoma." And Larry told everyone that he wrote it about me. And Sandy Pinkard said something about, heck, it started out as "You're the Reason I Left Oklahoma," and I wrote it about my ex-wife. Uh, so anyway, yeah, Larry Collins is a dear friend. And we do keep in touch on Facebook and reach
he
out.
went on and wrote Delta Dawn.
Yes, with Alex Harvey. Oh yeah, Larry is such a great writer, and I guess he's living in Reno now, or he's in Nevada somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, we were working on trying to get his sister Lori inducted into the Hall of Fame, which she was, but the process took a little bit of time, and unfortunately it came out just after she passed, so she didn't get to know, but her two daughters came and represented her, and
yes,
it was a nice event. They sent a great dress of hers, which is enshrined in there, that's really a classic period piece, but they also joined Wanda in starting rockabilly, so
right.
another little tie to some rockin' pioneers from Oklahoma.
Absolutely, Lori rocked it, and of course, and then little Larry with his double neck guitar. I mean, they were just precious, and they opened shows for so many of the legends.
And then she dated Ricky Nelson.
Oh, okay.
And was on the Ozzie and Harriet show a few times, and while you were dating Larry, so it was all tied together. Well, who else from Oklahoma? Have you had any others that you've gotten to work with that's an Oklahoma fellow star? I know you're very involved in the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame. You might be the preeminent artist that really supports the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame, so thanks for all you do to honor the others.
Oh, gosh. I'm just tickled to death. The year I was inducted, Jim Paul Blair was still running it, who we miss him dearly. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. He just worked so hard to bring people together. I'm trying to think of all the different Oklahoma artists. Of course, I've always been a fan of Roy Clark and opened some shows for him. And help me out, what other big...
Well, Vince or Reba,
oh,
or you
God.
worked with them?
Oh, yeah. Well, Vince. Oh, yeah. I've known Vince ever since, well, I first moved to Nashville. Yeah, and thing I love about Vince is he's just a good old boy. You know, what a voice, what a great guitar player. I run into him in Nashville quite a bit. And Reba, I've never gotten to work with Reba. I met her when we were both on Mercury Records, and I've always been a huge fan. And of course, and Susie, of course, what a great singer. And
her little sister.
Her little sister, Susie McIntyre, and pretty Miss Norma Jean. Oh, I mean, I've always loved her.
What about Jody Miller?
Oh, and Jody Miller, what a singer. The first time I heard Home of the Brave, Land of the Free on my little clock radio, I was still in Oklahoma, right? What year did that come out? Like
early 60s. Yeah.
Yes, I heard it on my little clock radio in my bedroom. I went, wow, who is that? Who is that? What a great, great singer, great voice.
You know, that's an interesting story behind that song because lady singers weren't given the priority with the printing press. And so that sold so fast on Capitol Records, but she had the unfortunate dubious honor of being a label mate with the Beatles. And so the printing presses needed to be tied up with the Beatles pressing. And so it would have been absolutely certified a gold record, but she was denied that, even though it's... A lot of people think Queen of the House is her biggest hit, but Home of the Brave would have... It probably ultimately became, but it was off for the tracking, and so there wasn't as many protections for artists then as there are now to help certify those things. And that was just a disservice to her, because you talk about maybe a protest song or whatever that would relate.
Great song.
Kind of a pioneer in that respect. And you were helpful to get her into the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame, so thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, she more than deserves it. More than deserves it.
One other that we asked several about, because she's no longer with us, but did you know Jean Shepherd?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I got to play the Opry several times when I was on the charts. I would love to play the Opry again, but everybody wants to play the Opry now because it's hip all
It is.
over again.
Uh-huh.
I first met her, though, I think, in Europe. Because
Really?
I've worked a lot in Europe throughout my career. Because in Europe, as far as American artists go and country music artists go, they love the traditional country sound, and then they also love the rockabilly. So I worked there a lot, but I remember after a show somewhere, it might have been in the UK, all of us were sitting around a table after the show, and Jean Shepherd was just telling it like it is. And I thought, man, I like her. She was, complaining about how some of the artists weren't straight country and all this. And she just, everybody loved her because she was totally, totally country and just straight ahead and honest to the genre.
Definitely a traditionalist, for sure.
Yeah.
But from Paul's Valley in the
Yeah.
Country Music Hall of Fame. And I think she has the distinction of being the longest serving Grand Ole Opry member ever, I think.
Oh, wow.
At the time of her death a few years ago.
Wow.
Well, a lot of artists, were struggling to think about, well, what are you doing today? They might have not as active a career, but that is not the case with you. You are as busy. I follow you on social media. I encourage everybody to follow Becky Hobbs on social media. And you have done something to honor your ancestor and your heritage with the Cherokee Nation, and you're involved with the nation. So that's a lead-in to tell us all about this, which I usually ask artists what their entire career are most proud of. But am I right that this might be the thing closest to your heart? Am I
It
guessing?
is.
Okay,
It truly
well, tell
is.
us all about it.
Well, I am a fifth great granddaughter of Nancy Ward, beloved woman of the Cherokee, also known as Nanyehi, her Cherokee name. She was born in 1738 in what is now eastern Tennessee. How she came into public awareness was in 1755. She accompanied her husband Kingfisher to the Battle of Taliwa, and she was chewing the bullets beside him to make them more deadly. Kingfisher was killed, fell to the ground. Nanyehi took his rifle and led the Cherokees to victory, and she was honored as Giga Gaya Gaya Aniyahwaya, war woman. And that's when she stood for peace. And she realized that the only way for the Cherokees to survive is to live in harmony with all the whites that are coming over the mountains, by the hundreds. She became a spokesperson for the Cherokee at the treaty meetings. She risked her life to make peace between the Cherokees and all others. And American history would not be as it is if she had not have walked this earth. So, yet basically her voice is unheard. And there's even a lot of Cherokees that really don't know who she was or what she did. So it became my mission to tell her story and to promote world peace today. So back in 2007, when Bartlesville was having its rendition of the Oklahoma Centennial, I was closing the show with songs that I wrote and everything. The director of the show that night was a guy named Nick Sweet. In my little segment, I did, of course, Angels Among Us, Jones on the Jukebox, Honky Tonk Saturday Night, but I included Pale Moon and Let There Be Peace, and I talked about Nancy Ward, because I thought, I'm in Indian territory here, and this needs to be performed tonight. After the show, Nick Sweet came up and he said, I know who Nancy Ward was. He had directed Trail of Tears in Tahlequah. So he knew. And he had also worked with Joe Sears, who's fellow artist from Bartlesville, Oklahoma. So out of the blue, I just said, well, let's write a musical. And so we did. And, all these years later, we have had 11 productions in 4 states. Most of our productions have been at the Tulsa Hard Rock in Cherokee Nation country. We've been very grateful for all the support that we've gotten. I wrote or co-wrote 18 songs for this musical. I co-wrote the book with Nick Sweet. It has been the project of my life. I've never worked so hard because, with an idea like this, it takes a lot of groundwork, a lot of doing. And with every production, it takes about 6 weeks of my time to get there early to teach all the vocal parts to the cast. And then show week, I bring in hubby, who's a world-class guitar player, played with Paul McCartney, Glenn Frey, Don Henley, Joe Walsh, on and on and on.
And his name is?
Dwayne Shakwa. Dwayne Shakwa. And usually we have a mini but mighty orchestra of 7 pieces. And we get the rest of the players we get locally. And it's been very, very rewarding, but just a lot of work.
Now, you mentioned Susie McIntyre. Of course, she worked with Reba as part of her, and then went on to do her own career. How about your sister? Did she get involved in any of this?
Heck no. My sister, she went to college, OSU, became a school teacher, married fairly young, and then married again. And she didn't even have a piano in her apartments or in her house. And yet she could play beautifully. And I always wonder why. She still loves music. She's on her iPhone all the time listening to the oldies, and she knows all the words, and she's singing along. And at family get-togethers, we'll sing, sibling harmonies. And I never understood it, as I would have a piano if I had to eat on it, sleep on it, whatever, crawl under it, which I did in LA. I had a baby grand piano that took up the whole little living room in the 2-room flat on the street in West LA.
Well, so are any of your family involved, though, in this production and screenplay and all that?
No. A lot of my family, my, intimate family is gone, both of my parents. But when we do have productions in the Cherokee Nation, of course we have as many Native Americans as we can, and we have a large cast. We've had as many as 50 in the cast, and that is because we have so many Native Americans that want to be in it and participate. And then there's been places, we've had productions in Hartwell, Georgia, Greenville, Texas, Kingsport, Tennessee. There have been places where we have literally had to beg people to be in the production because it is quite a commitment. My mission is to take her story to the world stage, and I ain't stopping, So our production of Nanyehi at the Hard Rock in 2014, I believe, we had Rudy Ramos from Lawton, Oklahoma, star as Peace Chief Atakulakula. And then soon after that, he got in Yellowstone as the grandfather of one of the female characters. So we're just so proud of Rudy. And of course, he was in was it High Chaparral?
Yes.
Yes, High Chaparral. And he is such a great guy, and so proud to have worked with him.
What were some of the biggest tours you ever did? Like the biggest audience you ever performed in front of?
Oh, gosh, let me think. Well, just something that just came to the top of my mind. Wembley, the Wembley Festival in London, I played it at least 2 times. And the year I played it, with Johnny Cash was the headliner. And oh my God, and after the festival, we played several more dates in Europe. I got to open for him. And he was such a love. And when people talk about his presence, I had never met him before, and I was in the gift shop at the hotel before the Wembley Festival. And I was bent over looking at something to buy. And I felt this power behind me. And I stood up, and he said, "You must be Becky Hobbs. I'm Johnny Cash." And I went, oh gosh, But what loves, and he and June Carter Cash and I and some of our band members got to kiss the Blarney Stone together in Cork, Ireland.
Well, that is a neat story.
Yeah, climbing up all these steps of the old castle and then kissing the Blarney Stone. So that was very exciting. And they just couldn't have been nicer people.
You mentioned Willie Nelson. You've been around him several times.
Yes, I first met Willie Nelson when I was living in LA for 9 years that I touched on earlier. I was at the Troubadour upstairs, which is where the dressing rooms were, and a lot of the artists would hang out up there. And Gary Busey, who I had worked with when I was in the all-girl band in Tulsa.
Another Oklahoman.
Another Oklahoman, yeah. Teddy Jack Eddy, Gary Busey. He was a drummer, and of course he ended up starring in the Buddy Holly story. And a great guy, a very unusual guy, but a longtime friend. But he introduced me to Willie Nelson upstairs at the Troubadour, and it was a little bit dark up there. And the first thing that caught me about Willie, when I looked in his eyes, I could see right to his soul. It was like forever, you know. It was just, what a spiritual guy. Now, some people might have said, well, he was just high, you know, maybe so. But his kindness just, you know, was amazing.
When I met him, we were talking about, I thanked him for coming and doing the tornado relief concert with Toby Keith, you know, after our devastating tornadoes in 2013.
Yeah.
And he, instead of taking any praise or any accolades like that, he immediately said, how is that neighborhood? Has it been rebuilt? Are the people okay? I mean, his concern just immediately was empathetic with them, instead of any kind of glory for him for doing that. So I always thought that was a telling moment. That's my one and only time to actually meet him. But he was very concerned and came here and immediately, I believe the story is they like turned the bus around so that he could be here once he heard that the concert was going to go on.
Oh,
So
my God.
we're always grateful that he helped our Oklahomans.
He's amazing. I just thought of another Okie connection that I can talk about, Merle Haggard.
Okay.
Oh, I had the pleasure of doing a bunch of shows with Merle. And I first met him, I guess I played his Lake Shasta bass tournament. I played that a couple of years, and Freddie Powers and he were hanging out. And Deanie Bird on upright bass. But the first time I played it, I had my band, and we were out there playing a bunch of gigs, and they could not have been more welcoming to me. And little Jimmy Dickens was on that show, and he said the kindest thing to me. I was, I don't know what made him say this, but he respected the fact that I was an entertainer as well. And there were a lot of other female artists on the show, and he said something like, honey, they can't even set up your piano bench. You know, I mean, that's the kind of cuteness and personality. But then the next time I played the bass tournament, I flew out there by myself, and I worked with the house band. And some of Merle's guys were playing, and they backed me. But I had a houseboat all to myself. When the band was with me, you know, it was me and the band, and we all, you know, there were several bedrooms on these big houseboats. But the year I went out there, I'm on a houseboat all by myself, and I didn't even know how to turn on the generator. I mean, I'm going, what the heck am I going to do? It's cold. Anyway, so Freddie Powers, Merle had a houseboat. Freddie Powers had a houseboat right by his. Freddie said, hey, he said, come over. I got a spare room. You can sleep in my houseboat. And I said, okay, that was great. So I hung out with Merle and Freddie and Deanie Bird and all of their good friends for probably about 3-4 days, and they did not sleep a wink. I mean, I just finally had to leave the party, and after not sleeping for like 2 days, Merle said, Debbie, can you make us some biscuits and gravy? You know, his wife at the time, or his girlfriend at the time. But we had more fun than a barrel of monkeys. And on the houseboat, I had a very small little Casio to jam on, you know, and not my big keyboard that was on the stage. And Merle Freddie would sing, and they'd play all those old swing standards from the 30s and 40s. And Merle would just play, because he just wanted to just play. And then several times he'd say, take it away, Beckaroo. And I'd play little solos on this little, it was almost like a toy, but it was just so much fun and so many great memories.
There's a great picture of you and Chris Christopherson, so tell us about meeting with Chris.
Okay, that was when I was still living in L.A., and Chris was playing, he was playing a gig there. I forget, there was a venue there that didn't last long, that was like a big outdoor amphitheater. And I think other people were on the show, and I must have played the show, but I was there hanging out and met Chris, and I had met him very briefly before then at a Cheech and Chong party. And I think Rita
His Coolidge, his wife.
Rita Coolidge was expecting at the time, and he was. I think that's when I first met him. But then we were hanging out at this outdoor amphitheater, and he was just so nice, and I was so honored because what a great songwriter. I mean, being a songwriter, I was just in awe of him.
Well, I mean, Kissing the Blarney Stone with Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
Houseboat Party for 3 or 4 days with Merle Haggard. And, Cheech and Chong Party with Chris Christopherson. Where are you going to get stories like this anywhere else?
I know. And I got to tell you another fun story that just a few months ago came to fruition. When I moved to L.A., Louis Anderson and I drove our jalopies out there, which I mentioned earlier. And one of the first people we met was a guy named Kim Fowley, who was like a Hollywood legend. He had, I think he had written Popsicles, Icicles by the Mermaids, and he had something to do with Alley Oop by the Hollywood Argyles. And he was the illegitimate son of Howard Hughes, what he always said. And he looked scary, really a lot like Howard Hughes. And his mother was a Hollywood B actress. And anyway, to cut to the chase, we met Kim Fowley. Kim was looking for songs for a producer named Bob Ezrin, who was getting ready to go in the studio and produce a brand new band called Kiss. Okie dokie, Louis Anderson and I pitched a song called Ain't None of Your Business, Never You Mind, just a real rockin' thing. And he took it to Bob Ezrin. We didn't even know this at first, but Kiss cut it, but it did not make the Destroyer album.
Oh,
and we didn't even know that for a while. Okay, and then this past November, the Kiss 45th anniversary of the Destroyer album was released with outtakes, a big, thick color book of photos, all kinds of memorabilia. It's a great big box set, and it has 4 CDs in it. Guess what song is on there twice? Ain't None of Your Business. It is on that as tracks only and an outtake with Peter Criss singing. So after 45 years, I got a Kiss cut.
Well, there you go. High five. What about Waylon Jennings? Did you ever work with him?
Waylon, yes. Yeah. And boy, let me think. I opened shows for him. Yeah, I knew Waylon, and he was great and just lots of fun. And I opened some shows, and of course Richie Albright, the drummer, and so many of his great players. And I'm thinking there were some Okies there.
Ralph Mooney, was he still guitar players in the Still Guitar Hall of Fame as an Okie?
Right. Yeah, so I got to meet Ralph, and yeah, Waylon, well, he was in his party days. I mean, I met so many of these guys in their party days. But
the best time to meet them, probably. They were a lot of fun.
So. Yes. Yeah,
I think they paid for it later, so they might not have been as fun to hang out with when they were. I know Waylon had to go into a wheelchair eventually, so.
Yes, yeah.
Probably good that you met him when you did.
Yeah. I have just, and I've had a great time in my career. I mean, let's face it. You know what I mean?
Well, you're none for the wear for it, that's for sure, so you're well preserved. Well, what about the biggest, like the television shows you got to do and stuff? Were some of the most exciting ones do you remember getting to appear on?
Well, probably the biggest one was the year I was nominated for New Female Artist of the Year at the ACMs, the Academy of Country Music Awards, and it was out in L.A. at Knott's Berry Farm. And I was very, very excited. And let's see, Hank Jr., I remember running into Hank Jr., and he stepped back. He said, are they all as, what did he say? Are they all as big as you or something? And I thought, God, is he calling me fat? And then, of course, I, recognized his sense of humor because, I'm about 4 foot tall. Oklahoma does have a lot of very small...
Petite,
petite women. Wanda and Norma Jean and Jody and a lot of us are a little. But anyway, yeah, that was probably the biggest audience because a lot of people were watching. But I love doing all the TNN shows. Ralph Emery loved to pick on me. He always that was back when I had the big hair. And he always would say, "Have you just come out of a tornado?" or something like that. And one night I was sitting on the piano bench waiting, and it was a commercial. And I had these little hair extensions plugged in, these braid things. And he came over and sat down by me on the piano bench and pulled on it. And I thought, my God, he's going to pull my hair off. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. If he does, he does. And it'll be a funny moment. But fortunately, it didn't. It was hooked in there pretty good. It didn't come out. But so I played that, Music City Tonight, Nashville Now, which was the Ralph Emery hosted show. Gosh.
And he recently passed, and a lot of
Yes.
artists were giving him a lot of props for all he did to help promote artists such as yourself.
He sure did. And as hard of a time as he would give a lot of us, he was a heart of gold. Just a heart of gold. And man, talk about knowing your country music.
Yeah. A total resource.
Yeah.
Well, so you've mentioned pretty much the Mount Rushmore of country music. So you've really got to work with all the greats. Was there just one, though, that you were just in awe of to be around that was so important to you musically that you really thought you connected with that
Oh, man.
sticks with you now? I know those are all greats, of course, that you just
Yeah.
mentioned.
Gosh, I can't really pick just one. I did forget to mention, though, Helen Reddy, because my very first big cut, when Lewis and I had moved to LA in 1974, she cut a song that Lewis and I wrote, I'll Be Your Audience. And then she cut 3 more of my songs, but a song called I Can't Say Goodbye to You that had won the American Song Festival back in 1978 or 79. She recorded that, and that's been now one of my biggest songs. And we lost Helen. But Helen was such a wonderful, not only performer and singer, but if she was pitched 2 songs that she liked equally as well, and one was written by a female, she would record the song written by a female because she knew that it could be difficult for a female in this business.
Right.
And she told me that herself. So that's someone that I really looked up to.
You also have had quite a bit of success overseas, right? You've gone and toured there pretty
Yes.
extensively and been recognized.
Yes, I'm very grateful that I've played in 40 countries.
Man.
And yeah, and one of my greatest blessings, I was chosen by Arts America to represent the U.S., and we toured Africa. We played 9 countries in Africa. And that was the most humbling and beautiful experiences of my life. We played in Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Lesotho, and there's a couple more. We were told before several of our shows, that was back when there was so many people with AIDS, and we were told one night before a show in, I think, Burundi, that over half of our audience had AIDS that night. And I thought, wow, how am I going to go out here and play my rock and stuff but man, the people were full of life and joy and responded to the music.
Appreciated the escape, I imagine.
Yes. And they had no idea, of course, who I was, because the picture of me was sort of me with my head like this and a keyboard. And they didn't know if they were going to hear a classical concert or what. But the people would just get up and clap and stomp their feet. And in every country we went to, we had a workshop with local musicians. So I got to hear, all the different percussion instruments and the marimba, and exchange musical ideas.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of these fellow musicians had AIDS. And it was heartbreaking to see, looking in someone's eyes that's my age.
Now, could they get your records there, you think, or were they just mostly
No, they
just
couldn't.
told that you were a star coming and they came out of just curiosity?
What we did was the first night we were in a country, we played at the U.S. ambassador's residence for the officials. The second night we played for the public, and people were invited to come. It was all sponsored by Arts America, so there was no ticket money or no admission or anything. And then in the larger countries like Kenya, we would have an extra night for the public.
And what would the crowd sizes range like at something like that?
Boy,
Because I would assume they would really just have to get word of mouth through the villages and stuff. There wouldn't have been like a newspaper or TV stations in some respects, right?
exactly. You know, some of the venues were large, like maybe, 500 seaters. That would be probably the biggest. And then the rest of them were maybe like, 100 to 200 people.
But way more than just a block party. This
Yes.
is definitely like a gathering.
Yes. And the one thing that I did notice is that at the home of the U.S. ambassadors, there was just a lot of opulence. It was like just, and big gate around it. And then you'd walk right out the gates, and there would be people starving on the street. And there
Dirt
would
floors and
yes,
their homes and stuff like that.
and there would be children holding bone-thin babies, and it was heartbreaking. And we just thought we got to bring the most joy that we can, and
How would you like to be remembered?
ooh, wow, as a grateful person. Grateful to be able to get the songs and bring them to people and to maybe make a difference in somebody's life. Just being a good person. And what Alabama has done is they have used Angels Among Us to raise millions and millions, over $800 million for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I would just like to be remembered as a good person who likes to help other people through my music.
Well, that's a powerful thing. What about in your career, and you've done so much, at what moment did you think, I've really arrived, I've made it?
I know. I'm looking for that moment. I'm still going there.
Yeah, that's a fair answer. You still are so active, and I appreciate everything that you've done going on right now. It's so fun to see an artist. Sometimes you wonder why they quit, because they seem like they have still so much to offer, and you're so vibrant. And so thank you for continuing to give us fans more that we can keep enjoying for years to come.
Oh gosh, thank you. I'm just so glad to be here.